Moms who know do less so they can focus on what matters most, taking care of themselves, their families, and living their God-given purpose. Moms who know focus on the little things they can do that grow to have a huge impact. You are connecting with your family, your true self, and your God-given purpose. You are a mom who knows. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and I'm joined today by Melanie Wellman. Melanie, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
I have been listening to your podcast for a while now, and as I've listened, I just kept feeling like, oh, I have to have her on the show. And it's in part selfishly because on Melanie's podcast, so she does a podcast that is a scripture study based podcast, and I love listening for the scripture study and for that element of it. But selfishly, I'm like, ooh, I want to know more about this girl. I want to know all her backstory and all her secrets. So I brought her on the podcast to tell us all.
You're a brave woman.
You're here.
You're a brave woman. I'm a brave woman to go live. Actually,
yeah.
I already divulged too much information.
This will be good. I just feel like, you have a lot to share and you've been through kind of a lot of things in your life. And I feel like this will help people. So thank you again for being here. And we're just going to start off. I would like people to know a little more about you. Tell us just briefly who you are.
Well, my name is Melanie Wellman, and I was born and raised in Arizona, in Phoenix. I was the oldest of 6 kids, active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints growing up, was very tethered to gospel principles, to scriptures. I always felt very close to Heavenly Father. And throughout the years, I think I've had a lot of experiences that may have knocked some people to the ground, but I felt like my faith strengthened me every time instead of making me weaker. I feel like my experiences have made me stronger. When I was young, my dad got cancer when I was in high school, and he passed away at 48 years old. He left behind 6 kids. I was the oldest. My youngest brother was 9. That was a really hard thing. I've, got married, lived in different places. I had postpartum depression after my kids. My husband lost his faith. I lived together in that situation for a long time. And so I've had hard things. I've had good things. I've had a fun life. I have 5 great kids. My oldest is married to a great man. My, second lives up there in Flagstaff too. And it's just, I have a great life, but I've had a lot of hard too. So I feel like both of those things have made me who I am.
Yeah. Okay. You have had a lot of hard. I was talking to someone not too long ago, and she was helping me with some marketing, and she's saying, go deep into your pain. And I said, I feel like I've had a really easy life, and it's hard for me to access that pain. And she just stopped and she thought about that for a second. She said, I never hear that. I don't even know if I can relate. Who has an easy life? And I thought, I don't know. A lot of people have a hard life. And when I hear all that, people have been through, all that you've been through, this is a lot of hard things. And yet you can see that when people have gone through hard things, there's so much growth there. And
Sure.
The hard is not something that is necessarily that we need to be fearful of or avoid.
Right.
It's going to come to us either way. Even for me that I say I've had an easy life, there are still hard things, but you can just see this growth process through the hard. So
Sure.
Let's talk then about some of these things that you have been through. And maybe the way we'll do this is kind of go through each experience and what it was like for you. Let's start with losing your dad at a young age, kind of what that challenge looked like and what it led you to on the other side.
Well, my dad was my best friend. I was super close to my dad. He was a cheerleader. He was the guy that was like, oh my gosh, you can't do anything wrong. You're the best. Throughout my whole life, I think I wanted to be good because I didn't want to, make my dad less proud of me. He was the cheerleader. So when he got cancer, it was a really hard thing for me because, like, in my mind, the worst thing that could ever happen to me would be to lose my dad. And so he got cancer. We had some miracles happen in our family that he was able to be healed when he had first got it. He got 5 more years, which we felt was a total blessing. But then when I was serving a mission for our church, I got a letter, or I actually got a phone call from my mission president, said, your dad's dying. What do you want to do? So I went home from Japan the next day. I left my mission 2 months early and went home kind of to help my mom and to watch him die. He didn't want to die in the hospital. He wanted to die at home. So my mom and I and my siblings, well, I don't know if you want to say they helped. We had water fights across his bed with like the empty syringes. And it was a time that was so sad, but yet so good. And I feel like one of the biggest gifts that my dad gave our family during that time was his faith and was his positive attitude. I've been with people since that have, had terminal illnesses or something, and they're so angry or scared that it's been very hard for their families. I think the worst trial I've ever gone through was lessened by my dad's amazing positive attitude. When I first heard that the cancer was back, he sent me a letter that said that his cancer was back, but he said, if the Lord thinks that I'm going to give up and be angry, he's wrong. My faith is strong. He just needs to refine me a little. And I accept whatever he has for me. And I think that's kind of been a motto that I've incorporated into my life because of his beautiful example. And so, as he was dying, he had colon cancer and was pretty miserable at the end. And he would say things like, I can't wait to trade in this body for a new one, that works perfectly. Or I'm so grateful that we're a together family forever. I'm so grateful that we're together forever. And it helped us and it strengthened us, but it was a blow. It was really, really hard for me. And throughout my life, it's been really hard to not have his influence and his guidance. A lot of times, even through this divorce, I wanted to just talk to him and just say, like, what do I do? What do I do here? And so that was a hard one for me, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's so hard. And at a young age. And I think sometimes what we don't even, death is just so hard. I've seen my husband go through this as he's lost both of his parents. And it's the initial losing them. And then it's the everything after when you want to go to that person and they're not there. And so it just keeps on. It's a wound that I guess, never fully heals, never fully closes up, because in every new situation, they're not there. And that's a really hard thing.
One of the beautiful things I think about that situation and what I've found in all the, I guess, subsequent situations that have happened in my life is that I learned some beautiful things about service through that experience, the things that people did for our family. I went, oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. I need to do that for somebody else. And that you see the goodness in people in these situations. So it's really hard to say, oh, it was the worst. My dad died when he was 48, because it was hard and it was sad, but it also taught us so many things about the goodness of people, even just people praying for other people. We always say like, oh, we'll be praying for you. But I felt it. Our family felt it. Like we were able to do things we never could have done, I don't think, if there weren't a million people praying for the Price family. And it was almost like 3 months later, I was pretty sad. And I was like, why am I so sad? And I thought, I think people have stopped praying. Like I literally felt the absence of all that love. And not that I didn't feel that I felt the absence of my Heavenly Father's love or Jesus Christ's love. I didn't. But there was a physical lessening, I think, of that comfort. So I think there's a lot of power in prayer that people, when they really say, I'll be praying for you, and they're really praying for you, it's a physical blessing.
Wow. That's so cool that you felt that. And I think that's so true. And, just a good reminder for us all to do that, to even people who don't pray, who are listening, to set that intention, to think of someone. Now, I believe even if you're not actually praying that the mechanism is the same, that still,
Yeah,
the spirit is what's comforting those people. But whether you think of that, however you think of that,
right.
in your mind, it has power, and
For
it
sure.
can help other people. Now,
For sure.
I'm going to, as we go through kind of each of these things that you have been through, I'm going to ask you this same question. So, with this experience with your dad and going through that, how did that help you find your purpose?
Well, I've currently, maybe this is an example. Currently, I volunteer with the surprise crisis response team. So I work with the fire department and I go out when there's a death, a drowning, a fire, when people are in complete chaos. We go in, the fire department shows up, they're trying to help, somebody dies. Fire department leaves and we stay and take care of everybody that's losing their minds. We get a mortuary there, we bring family there, we call people. I hold back people's hairs, they're throwing up, because they just found out they lost their mom. I work in these situations where people deal with death, and I feel like being that I've been through that situation, it's a lot easier for me to say, I understand what's happening. I understand how you feel. This is the worst. Like I don't say, oh, you're going to feel better tomorrow. But like, yeah, this is the worst thing ever. It sounds weird to say, but it actually feels really nice, I think, when people are having a hard time to just say, yeah, this is the worst. But I
Yeah.
felt like even that, and in different aspects in my life, when people go through death and those things, it's not as scary for me. I'm able to go over and talk to people. I know what I liked that people did for me. And so I feel like I'm, a little bit more open to do that for other people.
Oh, that is beautiful. Okay, I love that. I didn't even know that was a volunteer thing that you could do. And I love that you are using this experience to help other people. I love
Right.
that so much. Okay, let's talk a little bit. You said you dealt with postpartum depression. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Okay. First of all, I think it's really mean that we're girls and we have to deal with all of that, the hormones and emotions in life. I just think it stinks. But
Yeah.
like and here's one of my things that I think is sad, that we don't all sit around and like quilt, like, the pioneers, how you'd all they'd sit around and quilt all day, or they'd shuck peas together. Because I think we're so isolated now, and we sit in our houses and on our phones and we don't just talk to each other. So we're not 20 and saying like, oh, or 25 or whatever. I just got married and I just threw, a glass against the wall and screamed at my husband, and someone else goes, yeah, me too. And we go, oh crap, it's because I'm on the pill. You're on the pill. Oh my gosh, it made me a maniac. And I think we don't talk to each other enough to realize that some of these things that are happening to us is all like hormone induced. So starting with throwing cantaloupe rinds across a room or whatever, when I first got married and I got on some birth control, it kind of made me mean. And it's interesting to watch people as they first get married and you're like, maybe you shouldn't be on that anymore. But, I had problems with that. I had to do different things for birth control, or maybe just have 5 children. But that was hard for me when I was first married. You're trying to deal with being married to a boy, and then you're still, it was hard, but you add hormone influxes on top of that. And then after I think I was okay with my first, a little bit hard after my second. I definitely went through a huge problem after my third. And sometimes people just think postpartum depression is sitting around being sad. But with me, it came out in sad. It came out in anxiety, paranoia. It came out in thoughts like, maybe I should just drive my car into that pole because I'm a terrible mother who wants, I shouldn't have this responsibility of raising these kids because I'm a terrible person. And maybe if I was gone, my kids would be better off. And it also comes out in rage sometimes, like irritability, screaming, those kind of things happen from it too. And I don't think people realize, they think that postpartum depression is just sitting there like, boo-hoo, I'm sad. And it's not. It's those other things combined. I was sure the cable guy had stolen my keys when he came to my house one time and he was going to come back and kill me. It made no sense. And I knew it was crazy. And I was sitting in my closet, like scared to death that he was coming back to kill me. And I knew in my head that it didn't make any sense, but it still was scary. And so I think that those feelings after you have a baby there's so many emotions and it's so hard to deal with that. And I was grateful that I was able to talk to my doctor and say, this isn't right. I feel really bad. And then I was able to get on some medications that helped me settle down. And I had mentioned it in church one time. I had said, oh, I have postpartum depression. This has been hard for me. And one night I got a knock on the door at like 2 a.m. and me and my husband are like, it's a home invasion. Who's here? We're like running
it's the
around.
Cable guy.
Yeah, exactly. The cable guy is here. All my worst nightmares are coming true. And our neighbor actually called us and said, there's a girl on your front porch. And so we opened the door and it was a girl from church. And she said it was either here or the hospital. And she had just had a baby and she had heard me talking about it in church. And so she came over and I was able to love her and commiserate with her and get her to the doctor. So I think our silence on those issues is bad. And I was grateful in that time of my life that I was able to talk about it more. And I even had a woman write to me years later that said, I was in church composing my suicide note in my head when I heard you talk about it. And I thought, if someone like her could go through it, then I can too. So I think our silence is deadly,
Literally sometimes.
It can be. And so admitting that, and not everybody likes to say, yeah, I threw a teacup across the wall and told my husband to sleep in glass. Yeah, I did that. I really did. How horrible is that? Like, I'm the worst person. Yeah, no wonder she's divorced. She's insane. But like that happens. Like it was after it was actually the night that's what it was. It was the night I was about to have my son. And boom, hormonal crazy. Yeah, sorry, threw a glass at the wall. So sometimes we just have to say, yeah, I'm crazy, whatever. And then other women can say, wow, she's crazy. So am I. Let's all join arms and be crazy.
It makes us feel good when
it does. Somebody as amazing as Melanie was once crazy. Wow, I have so much potential.
Oh, I love it. Well, okay. It makes me laugh, but it is quite serious. And,
Sure.
There's so much here. So how long did it last before you got help?
It was after the birth of my second. I was just having a hard time. And I was actually like praying. I was reading scriptures. I was, fasting. Some people go without food for a couple meals when you have a problem and praying. I was doing all that, like, why can't I feel better? And one day I opened my scriptures and I read something in the Bible about, I just had this feeling. No, that's not true. I had this feeling like go to the doctor. And I went and talked to my gynecologist and I just said, you know what? I don't feel right. And he said, well, let's try you on this medication. And when I got home, I opened the Bible somewhere and I read like the moment of your peace has come. And I just really felt like, yeah, you needed to get on some medication. And so I felt better for quite a while. But then after the birth of my next child, I had trouble. And I've continually been on medication since then. And I have no qualms about it. None. And I just think, you know what? Would you get mad at somebody who's got diabetes? Oh, I can't believe you take insulin every day. You're so weak. Like you wouldn't. You're like, yeah, guess what? My mind doesn't work quite right. And so I take this medication to help me, feel better. Who cares? And I think the stigma about that needs to go away.
Yeah. And I think that talking about it and being open about it is exactly what helps it go away. Because then as soon as you open up about that, then the shame goes away. And like, oh, well, I do that too. That's just normal and that's not a big deal anymore. We can talk about it and it helps so many people. So I think there's already been a few things that you have shared that relate to purpose in this. But what would you say that postpartum depression has helped you to learn and led you to know about your purpose?
Well, just to not keep my mouth closed. I think a lot of us are very private people, and I'm the opposite. Like, hey, maybe you should keep that to yourself. Oh, boy. In one of the podcasts, I really did talk about one of my dating experiences, and it was the worst. And after I got done, I'm like, why did I share that with 10,000 people? But I do think that it taught me that sometimes closing our mouth about trials is a bad idea because you can save lives by opening your mouth. And so I think it taught me not to be ashamed of things that happen to us in our life because other people need to know. And it's carried on into these other aspects of my life, in divorce, in these other things that I don't keep it all inside, but I feel like somebody can learn from my problems so that somebody else doesn't have to go through what I did for so long. And here's a happy story at the end. I'm 46 now. Yeah, old. And I think I'm like headed through menopause and I feel so much better. Like I feel hormonally normal now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a lovely life. So I just want to say, like, there is an end to it. You know, you can get to the other side and be happy. And medication helped me to feel okay and to level out my moods during those things too. So
Yeah. Okay. So good. So helpful for people. I appreciate you being willing to speak about something that can be kept quiet, and I appreciate that you don't keep quiet about it. I think that's great. So one of the other big things that you have been through is a divorce. And you mentioned that your husband had lost his faith and you stayed together for a while in that situation and then divorced. So how long have you been divorced at this point?
Just since January. I was married for 23 years and it was final in January.
Okay. So tell us about that experience.
Well, I married someone of my same faith. We had decided to raise our children a certain way. We went to church all the time. We read scriptures together. We prayed as a family. And about 13 years into our marriage, my husband decided that he no longer believed in the church we grew up in, and then it gradually turned to not believing in anything, and it caused quite a divide. I think we both tried for a long time to keep it together. I think we tried for our kids. We fought bad anyway, so it's not all because he left faith and I didn't. We always had a hard time communicating. I think a lot would have been helped if we would have gone to counseling, but he didn't want to do that. So that was hard for me too, because I thought, this isn't worth giving this whole thing up, but in the end, we needed peace in our home and my kids didn't feel peace and there was too much contention. And so I had to go and, losing my dad was horrible, but I think losing my marriage was worse. I think, I had all of the faith that I'd see my dad again, that we would have this relationship that could continue on for the eternities, and ending a 23-year marriage and seeing him up the street with his new girlfriend and, sending my kids away every other week. That's been the hardest. I was a stay-at-home mom for 23 years and now every other week I had no children. And so when you talk about purpose, I have no purpose anymore. That was my thought, what's my purpose in this world now? And so it's been really, really hard. But 8 months later, it's like I'm a different person. And I think maybe even now, my purpose in this has been to say, you're going to be okay. And I read so many things that said like, you're going to be fine. And I remember like laying on my bed, bawling my eyes out, saying, I'm never going to be fine. I'm never going to feel okay again. And now I can say, you guys, I feel okay again. Like I've found a purpose with this podcast that's been amazing, but I have found just in being able to tell people like, it's okay, and I also, in the last podcast, I said something like, just don't get divorced. And I've had 2 people write me in the last couple of days that just said, I've been trying to decide what to do. And I really felt hope and joy when you said that. And I want to stay. So even me getting divorced and saying, you guys, try with all your heart to keep it together. Not, hey, everybody, yeah, go get divorced. High five, it's the best. But being able to say, it sucks, don't get divorced, maybe is helping people too.
Yeah, I listened to that podcast and I was really touched that you are standing in this place where you're saying, you know what? I divorced, but I still believe in marriage. I'm still an advocate for marriage. And I think
100%.
That's powerful.
100%. And don't give up if you don't have to. We were at a part where there was so much contention in our home that it was detrimental for our children and it had to end. But if you can save it at any cost, if you can go to counseling, if you can do those things, do it, because being divorced is not great. It's in my situation, it had to happen, but I wish it didn't because it sucks.
Yes. Okay. Oh, well, again, I feel like all of these experiences have taught you and refined you, but even more than that, because of your openness, because you're willing to share, then they become this learning experience for others. And so I appreciate that so much. I think, clearly with your podcast, putting these things out there is huge because you're able to, other people are able to connect and to feel like, okay, Melanie learned this lesson the hard way. Maybe I don't have to learn it quite as hard. It can shortcut that for them.
Yeah.
So I would love to know your definition. How would you define purpose?
Well, it's funny you asked that because if anybody listens to my podcast, I love this thesaurus. Like I'm always like, well, here's a synonym. So I actually looked up purpose when we were talking about this, and it said like the synonyms of purpose are aim, design, dream, goal, ideal, meaning, deliberateness. And the thing that I loved about goal as one of those words is it says it's something obtained only by prolonged effort and hardship. And I think my purpose in my life has come by prolonged effort and hardship. Like I never gave up. I never lost my faith. I never shook my fist at heaven and said, why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. I deserve a perfect life. I never did that. I said, my life isn't perfect and things are really hard, so you got to help me right now. And I think that all of those challenges have brought me to this woman of faith that I am now. And I think that my voice through this podcast is more powerful because of all the hardships. And, there was a few weeks back that we were in 2 Corinthians and we were talking about Paul, and he was talking about this thorn in his flesh that he had and this trial that he had literally been trying to pray away. He's like, take this away. And he said, God is not taking this trial away from me. And then he says, and it was in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10. Do you care if I share scripture? Is that okay?
Of course, share it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it says in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10, and this is Paul talking, and he said unto me, this is the Lord talking, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And I think going through these trials and these times when I felt so weak and I couldn't have gotten out of them by myself, that's when I came to know Christ. That's when I came to be a person of unwavering faith, I think now. Like, bring it, whatever, because I know that comfort is real, and I feel like I'm able to share that comfort with others. So I'm so grateful for all of this, even though there's been some hard things. And my hard things aren't as hard as other people's things. I know other people have really hard things. But the things that I've gone through have definitely helped me to be more compassionate. And my purpose, I feel now, is to get on the podcast every week and tell people, don't give up. Don't give up. No matter where you are, don't give up. There's people that will help you. You can go help somebody else. And in the end, we're never, ever, ever alone if we have faith in God and Jesus Christ.
And that's just the message so many people need to hear, because so many people do feel alone. And it can never, it can never be said too much, because we forget every day, the more we hear it, the more that gets cemented in. It helps us in those moments of weakness where we start to forget. So Melanie, where can people get more from you?
Well, I have a podcast called Come Follow Me for Us. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also go to comefollowmeforus.com. Occasionally, I write things, on there, but the podcasts are always there too. And it comes out every Monday or Tuesday, depending, if I have my kids for that week. Sometimes it comes out a little later, but Monday or Tuesday, and it goes through a few scriptures in the New Testament every week.
Okay. And I love it. I love listening to that podcast. So my final question for you is, as people are listening to this, what one little thing do you hope that they will do differently or even think about differently because of this conversation that we've had today?
I hope that they can just feel free and empowered to be themselves, to say life stinks sometimes, and not to have to put on this persona or this facade of perfection, because none of us are perfect. We all have our trials, and who knows what we say today, how that can save somebody tomorrow. So let's stop pretending we're perfect, because a lot of people that write to me about the podcast say, I love you because you're real. And I think, let's just be real, people.
Yeah, that is exactly what's needed.
Let's just be real, people.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
I love it. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for being with us today.
You bet.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to Moms Who Know. I seriously loved that episode, and I hope you guys did too. I just think Melanie is so much fun and so real, and I appreciate so much her being willing to share on her own podcast. A lot of it is scripture-based, and she does share quite a bit of herself, but going deep into her life story was just something that I was so excited to get to do. And I just love the connection with her, and I hope you just felt that authenticity. And I think for me, that's my one little takeaway today, is to be real, to be imperfect, to be authentic, and to just let me be me. And I think that's a great takeaway for all of us. But I want to know what stood out to you. What one little thing are you going to think about differently or do differently because of what you've heard today? Come and share with us at Moms Who Know Podcast on Instagram or Facebook, or just tell a friend. Better yet, share this episode with a friend. If this is something that touched you or was meaningful to you, you can share right now from wherever you're listening to on the podcast app. You can share on social, or just tell a friend. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week on Moms Who Know.